Hey everyone, welcome to Software Testing Mentor and RCV Academy. Today we are here with Sakshi Savle, who is a fresher and doing internship in one of the organizations in Pune, India. She is here for the mock interview, and mostly today's focus will be the manual testing questions for her. She has some automation knowledge and background as well, but that is not the core part of this interview. It will be mostly focusing on the fresher and 1 year level interview for the software testing. So welcome, Sakshi. How are you?
I'm fine, sir. What about you, sir?
Yeah, thank you very much. So Sakshi, before we proceed, I would like to mention that this video will be recorded and posted on the YouTube channel for other viewers to watch. Are you fine with that?
Yes, sir, absolutely. Totally.
Okay, cool. So thank you, Sakshi, for coming, and let's straight away dive into the questions. So, all right, Sakshi, so can you tell me something about yourself?
Yes, thank you, sir, for giving me an opportunity to introduce myself. So my name is Sakshi Vinod Saure. I was born and brought up in Akola, Maharashtra. I completed my graduation in electronics and telecommunication engineering. I had done my secondary and higher secondary school from Hindu Nanpit Convent and RLT College of Science, Akola, respectively. Whereas I am certified in software testing. Also, I am having good technical skill like C, CPP, Java, HTML, etc. Then my family consists of 4 members, including myself. My objective in life is to learn technical and technical skill and prove my worth. Currently, I'm doing internship in Gravita Technology Private Limited, Pune. That's all about me, sir.
All right, excellent. So that's nice, Sakshi. Just quick tips on the introduction part. Do not, I mean, you can skip the personal aspect of your introduction. For example, how many members or you know, like you covered the how many members are there in the family. So you can skip that part. But apart from that, rest is all good. There are previous videos that I have covered, you know, how you can target this introducing about yourself. So try to include the maximum of your work related or role related. So basically, whenever you are looking for a particular role, research for the role, go for the role, check what the job description says, and based on that, come up with the pointers that you have done either in the college, or even if you haven't done, how you will add the value in terms of work to that particular role and the growth of the organization. Okay, so it's something like whatever you have said is absolutely fine, like the why you want to work and you want to be in the technical field. So show your interest, because you are doing the automation as well, right? So show your interest in automation and what you have done in automation or what you have done in manual testing as an intern. Okay, just try to include a couple of more points, but overall it's good. The introduction is good. Just briefly, few more things there. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. So what do you understand by black box testing?
Okay, so a black box testing is requirement and specification. It does not depend on the internal path, core structure, and the software being implemented. Then black box testing does not need any code programming knowledge, and
Yeah.
so black box testing also we called as a input output testing, and the closed box testing, functional testing.
Yeah.
So and also the black box testing, including the boundary value and features of the black box testing, like boundary value analysis, equivalence partitioning, then static partitioning, and decision table transition. So in boundary value analysis, here we take the 2 boundaries, like that we check the test the data between the boundary. For example, the boundary set is from A to B. So here we input the data and like A minus 1, A plus 1. And and for B value, we input the data like B minus 1, B plus 1. So after that, we move to the equivalence partitioning method. So as my convenient, I I divided the equivalent partition in three types. In time one, we test the data uh, in test cases. We give the one valid input and two invalid input in type 1. In type 2 method, we give only one valid input and two invalid input. For example, if I want to check the train number by inputting the train number, I want to search the train. So I just type the valid train number and search, and in second time I just put the invalid train number. So this is the type 2. And in type 3, here we do the Boolean search like true or false condition, radio check buttons. So that is the black box testing, sir.
Yeah, okay, great. So very detailed answer, and you have covered some of the black box test design techniques as well. So most of the answer is correct, but the last part that you have mentioned about the equivalence partitioning is something which confused me a little bit. But overall, your understanding about the black box testing is fine, that it doesn't require the knowledge of the internal working structure or the code of any application. You just test it as sort of something, a black box is there. Software is a black box for you. Don't know how internal workings are there for the software application. You provide the input and you verify the output, right? So you have covered that. In terms of equivalence partition, I got a bit confused there. So you mentioned a couple of inputs. That's absolutely fine for the equivalence partition, like the different input, positive, valid and invalid input that you will provide. But when we say equivalence partition, say for example, there is a text box on a web page. So let's get an answer from you. So there is a text box on a web page, and that text box accepts numbers, only numbers like integers, and from 10 to 50. So what will be the equivalence partition for this particular field, the text box? How many partitions will be there?
So we just put the valid and we just check the data by using the putting the value like 10 to 15, no?
10 to 50, 50. Yeah.
10 to 15. So here we just put the value like 8, 9. So after that 51, 52, and in between 10 to 50 values. So here
that's
we
correct.
check by using this.
So so you have covered like boundary value analysis, right? So boundaries. So because the valid values are between 10 to 50. So 10 is the valid value, 50 is the valid value, right? So when you absolutely, your understanding about boundary value analysis is perfectly fine. So you test, say you took the example of A to B, right? So you test A plus 1, A minus 1, B plus 1, B. So in the equivalence partition, so same example, 10 to 50. So 10 is the valid input, 50 is the valid input. So between any value between 10 to 50 are the valid values, right? So this is the valid partition, right? So from 10 to 50 is a valid partition. Anything above 50 is invalid partition. Anything below 10 is invalid partition, right? So now how many partitions are there in altogether?
2.
3. So 2 invalid. First invalid is less than 10, right? Second invalid is above 50. And third partition is the valid partition. So for a text field in any web page. So these are, like simple examples that once you put these examples in front of the interviewer, you will definitely get into the IT and testing. Okay. So rest all your understanding about boundary value analysis, boundary values is fine. Okay. In terms of equivalence partition, just think about the partition. So like if you go to shopping, okay, so shopping usually, say for example, there are many offers. So they say if you spend up to 500, you get 10% discount. If you spend from 500 to 2500, you get 20% discount, right? So these are some of the scenarios where you actually practically, when you are testing the application, you will apply these concepts to design your test cases. Otherwise, if you don't apply these black box test design techniques, you will end up randomly testing and you might miss some of the partition, right? So that's why these techniques are important. And partition like invalid, valid is the way we have just discussed. That's how you figure out. Okay. Any questions, any clarifications in this one?
No, sir.
You'll be able to explain this now perfectly fine. Like equivalence partitioning and BVA are the most widely used test design techniques, right? So it doesn't matter how much experience you gain in the software testing, these are the techniques you will always use for testing applications. So get your understanding absolutely correct in that sense. It will really help. Okay. All right. So I think you already covered some of the techniques. So my next question was, what are some of the black box test design techniques? So you have already covered some of them. So let's move on to the next question. I'll skip this test design technique discussion. We have anyways covered a lot of it. So what is static testing?
Okay. So static testing, it is the verification process, and it is done at the initial stage of the software development life cycle, and it needs the code deployment. Here we do before the code deployment, and the example of the static testing is the if developer design a code, and that code after developing the code, the another developer check that code manually before executing that. So and also the test case and test plan, also the example of the static testing. So this is the static testing.
Yeah, absolutely correct. So this is basically sort of, say, for example, you are developing some software, okay? And software is not just piece of code, right? It's basically the whole process that's involved in that development life cycle, and that development life cycle produces code, release notes, lots of documentation, right? So when you start developing any software, there is documentation that starts, there are design discussions that happen, there is a requirement discussion. So if you're following agile, there'll be user stories which will require some acceptance criteria. So all those things, when during the analysis phase itself, when you do not actually execute the code, right, or right from the starting of the software development lifecycle, you start analyzing, you start reviewing the documents. If code has been written, so peer review happens, which is basically code review. So in the code review, say for example, you are writing Java code, right, or Python code, and within the Python code, when there is peer review happening, happening, peer review is happening. In that, there is a variable that you have defined which you haven't used anywhere, right? So there are many coding practices that when other person who is looking at your code will be able to identify, and without executing. So just by meeting and discussing or reviewing, and there are many different types of review, like there will be formal review, informal review, and all those reviews and walkthroughs that happen have a different level of formality and informality. Okay, so these all things come into static testing, and your answer is absolutely correct. I just added few more things so that you can add these examples. Basically, like you can add the example of coding or code review or peer review. What exactly happens in peer review, right? Somebody has written code, get some examples of what usually will happen in the peer review. Okay, so that's good answer, Sakshi. Let's move on to the next one. So basically, what do you understand by dynamic testing? Again, related to static, what exactly is dynamic testing, and When does it
Okay,
happen?
so dynamic testing is exactly opposite to the static testing.
Mm-hmm.
So in dynamic testing, there is a validation process, and after that, it is the latter stage of the software development life cycle. And for example, Word documents. So we install. So here the Word we install in our machine
Mm-hmm.
or the computer. So in that we check that initially we check that the software document is proper or not, the software information and all. So it is the part of the static testing. After that, installing the software, we launch it. So after the launch it properly in our device. So it is properly launched or not, and we open that software and check all the application it is properly working or not, and all the features and functionality of that application. So it is the part of the dynamic testing.
That's absolutely correct. Yes. So I think you have covered the example of Word, like installing, launching, and that's the best way to answer any of the question. If you provide the examples with your questions as you have did for this one, it shows that you understand the concept and how that is basically applied in real scenarios. So that's absolutely correct. Try to include as many examples as you can, right? So, but this is absolutely correct answer, that you actually, you know, launch the application, and then after launching the application, you do interact with the application to test and proceed. So that's good. Moving on to the next one. What is integration testing?
Okay, so integration testing, it is the level of software testing where individual units are combined and tested to verify if they are working as per the requirement document. So basically, the test plan takes the data flow between the two features or modules of an application. Basically, integration testing divided into two types, that is incremental testing, integration testing, and non-incremental integration testing.
Mhm.
Incremental integration testing again divided into two types, that is top-down approach and bottom-up approach. So in top-down approach, here we incrementally add the modules such that we just check the flow of data. Added mod that the added module is the child of previous module.
Mhm.
So here we check the data flow between the parent child. So
Mhm.
for example, in Gmail application, that is the compose, inbox, trash. So these are the child of the Gmail.
Mhm.
So and in the bottom up approach, here we incrementally add the module such that um the child that added module is the child of previous module,
Mhm.
uh, child of previous parent module. So
Mhm.
here we check in the bottom up approach, like we go to the descending here, and that is the non-incremental testing. It is the Big Bang method of testing. So here we just randomly pick any two features and check the data flow between them. So that is the and also, for example, in Gmail application, if I want to say there is a two user of Gmail application, user A and user B. If I want to send hi to the user B, so by using compose mail, I send hi to the user B. So I just check that in inbox the hi message is received to the user B. So
Mhm.
that is the integration testing.
Right. Yeah. So covered in lot detail. That's absolutely correct. You have covered the Big Bang approach, top down, bottom up with example, right? So overall, it's absolutely fine, depending on the examples that you have took. Try to refine it a little bit when it comes to, say, for example, when you are explaining the Big Bang approach, right? So Big Bang approach or Big Bang integration. Um, happens when all the modules are integrated at once, and then you basically test the integration, the integrated, or as you mentioned, like integration of two modules. You randomly, basically pick top down, bottom up. You have anyways covered with example of Gmail. So very, very detailed. And I think this shows that you have actually read about the integration testing and read along with the examples, so which is very, very good aspect of answering these sort of question. Now there will be like couple of feedback wherein you have to, the way you articulate your answer, the flow. Okay, so my feedback here is that you articulate it, or basically make the answer flow in such a way that it aligns, each statement of your answer aligns one after the other, right? So when you started with the types, then you cover all the types and then move on with the examples, right? So say for example what it is, then types, then within the types these are the examples, something like that, right? Apart from that, I think it's absolutely, I'm very satisfied with the answer. Okay, all right, so let's move on. So what do you understand by system testing?
Okay. So system testing, it is end-to-end testing. So in system testing, we check the software application. We check the all the features of the software application in system testing, and if our system is compatible or not, here we check in system testing.
Right. Okay. So this, I think you need a little bit clarification here. So system testing basically comes after the integration testing, right? So after you have
High
tested
level
the,
of testing.
yeah. So system as a whole. Okay. So say for example, you are, I'll take a non-IT or non-software example. So when we say unit testing, so you say for example you are testing a car. Okay, so in the car, the lowest level of component that could be possible, like for a wheel, let's say wheel is the lowest level component. So when you test just wheel, it's a unit testing. When you integrate the wheel, or when you fit the wheel with the axle, okay, so that's sort of integration. Okay, and so wheel is the lowest level of unit, and then you integrate it with the axle. So basically you are following what approach you are following. You are following the bottom up approach here, right? So basically you have the unit, the lowest level unit, and then you are integrating it with the higher level unit, which is the axle. Okay, and then when the whole thing is integrated, so axle is ready, the body is there, doors are fitted into, so that makes it the whole system, or the car is a system, right? The whole system. So when you are testing system as a whole, the car as a whole, that's a system testing. And same is true with the software. So think of it as the lowest level of unit, any components. Say for example, when you are testing an e-commerce application, so within an e-commerce application, checkout module, say for example, checkout module is your lowest level module. Okay, just assume it's not the lowest level module, because checkout in itself will have many smaller units, but we are just assuming that checkout is the lowest level entity unit. When checkout is integrated in the website, then there is a add items, then the whole process, the business process of the buying process is implemented, and e-commerce website is available as a whole system. You're testing it as end to end. Then that is system testing. When we say integration testing, then it might be adding the item into the cart. So there is a cart component, and then there are items. When you click on add items, the item should get added into the cart. So when you're just testing that part, that's integration. When you're testing the whole end-to-end, basically, whole system, it's system testing. All right, any questions on this?
No.
Right.
Sir.
Yeah, so just to continue this one, people might ask, or interviewer might ask on top of this, what is system integration testing? Right, so system testing and system integration testing. So system testing, say for example, you have an application that works as a complete system, standalone, works in itself. But then when you there might be possibility that there are integration points from that system to other systems. Okay. So when there are multiple systems integrated, then that is what system integration testing. Okay. So just make a note of it. All right, let's move on. So can you explain the testing principle? Testing is context dependent. What does it mean?
Okay, testing, which basically means that that the way you test an e-commerce site, so will different from the way that you test a commercial site. So we need to that the developed software are not ideally, you might use a different application methodologies and techniques for, because every software having a different methodologies and techniques for the testing. So it is the contains testing.
Yeah. Okay. So context dependent, basically, like you have, your answer is correct. Every software has a different purpose to solve, right? Like if a software is used in hospitals and is used in life-saving appliances of the hospital, when you will test it, you will test it in much different way and very thoroughly as compared to testing an e-commerce website, right? As you mentioned. So because the context or where the particular software is going to be used impacts the way you are going to test it. Okay, if it is a software in the flights, because any software which involves life critical, life saving sort of features, that will be tested separately, that will be tested differently as compared to any e-commerce or any other application which doesn't have too much impact. So for e-commerce website, even if there are production defects, that's fine, right? But for a life critical application, if there are defects and somebody loses life because of those defects, that's very severe issue. So that is why we say it's context dependent, and you can take a couple of these sort of examples. Okay. All right. So you have worked on web-based applications as well, I can see in your resume. So what do you understand by web-based applications?
So web-based application is the application that runs on different web browser. So here we check also the cross-browser testing, and here we also check the compatibility of our application. So in compatibility testing, we check our application is more compatible in software and platform, software and hardware platform. And also for the cross-browser technique,
yes, go ahead.
So in cross-browser testing, we use different cross-browser tools like Util IE, then Util Firefox browsing, and IE tester. So here we use the tools for the web application.
Okay, so I think Sakshi here, a web-based application, just maybe go ahead and read a little bit more on the web-based application, okay, to get your understanding refined. All right. So basically, web-based application, if we talk about some of the examples, can you give me some examples of web-based application?
Like government sites, then Word documents, and another Adobe Reader. So many web-based applications.
Right. So Word document, when you use it on your computer, which is installed locally, is that a web-based application? Or when you use Microsoft 365, basically when you launch it from the browser? So there are two options in the Word that you have. One is locally installed on your computer. The other is
when I launch it from the Chrome.
Right. So for example, like Google Sheets, similar to what, like
Google Sheets,
Google
yes.
Sheets and all. Yes,
Google Docs,
absolutely. Yeah. So these are all web-based application. Okay. And your answer is sort of correct. I won't say that it is not correct. You mentioned that web application you can access from the browser, but then try to include what exactly the web applications are. So like any application wherein you have the web server and then web application server. Okay. So say, for example, when you access Facebook, right? So Facebook is not available on your server or locally any of your machine, right? Facebook server, or it serves all the functionality through the web application or web application server. So there is a request that gets triggered from the browser. So when you open the browser, you request, basically when you say facebook.com, you send that request, hits the web server. Then say, for example, you requested to see somebody's profile, right? So that request hits and web application server processes that request. So it's basically a software that serves the request over the internet. Okay. So there is a web application server and there is a business logic that is implemented, and web application server serves that over the internet. So you can access it from any browser, anywhere, right? So most of the applications that you will see nowadays are web applications, and your desktop application,
So
anything. Yeah.
by using the Utilo IE, then tester IE.
Mm-hmm.
So here, so here, so, so here we check the installed different version of the browser by using
Mm-hmm.
that tools.
Mm-hmm.
So that is okay
Yeah,
with
that's see, when you are testing your web application in different versions of browsers or different, um, different browsers or different
is
browser
properly
versions
working or not.
combinations, that's all you actually do, right? So for example, when you test amazon.com website or facebook.com, they test it on many different browser combinations,
Yes,
and
Opera
like
mini, Opera
mobile, your desktop. So that
desktop.
testing basically happens in different browsers. But web
Right.
application as such, get a little bit deeper understanding what exactly web application is, client server architecture. Just read a little bit about that. All right. But yeah, overall, not bad answer. Okay. So let's move on to the next one. So why do you do regression testing, and when do you do regression testing?
So regression testing we done if we check the code that if we change the code and check that the code change will impact on the entire features of the application. So here we check by using the regression testing, and the main purpose of regression testing is to check that the changes made by that by you by on that code is impacted by whole application or not.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, regression testing is also divided into three types. That is fully regression testing, unit regression testing, and regional regression testing.
Mm-hmm.
So in unit regional regression, in unit regression testing, here we developer here we just tell the developer that here there is a defect, so developer fix that defect and resolved it. So after that we just retest only that defect.
Mm-hmm.
So it is the unit regional unit regression testing. After that there is the regional regression testing. Here we check all the there impacted code. So here we check impacted region only in the regional regression testing, and the
Mm-hmm.
fully regional regression testing fully. So here we check that if we change the code and that code is affect on the entire application.
Mm-hmm.
So here we that impact is entire on entire application. So here we check all the application fully. Sorry, so here it is a fully regression testing.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned that some unit testing, unit regression testing, or you
Yes.
just test that particular defect. So how is retesting different from the unit regression that you mentioned? So retesting is testing the same test case that has failed after the defect has fixed. So is it same, different?
No, in a second, if we design the test case, so in the second or many other test, we retest that application.
Mm-hmm.
In the second time we test, so it is the part of the regression testing, I think.
Okay. Okay. All right. Yeah. So I think the regression types that you have covered, they are all okay. So when you just test the failure, that is retesting. And in terms of regression testing, yes, regression testing is the core part of the software testing, and it tests the changes that have been made as part of the fix doesn't impact any of the surrounding area of that module or the whole application, right? So when you are just testing any of the fixes, if you're just re-executing that part, that is retesting, and you can't bucket it as a regression testing. Okay, so just make a note of that when you are just retesting the failure, then it's a retesting and not a regression testing. Retesting is part of, you can say it's a subset of
Um,
regression.
I
So
mean, sir,
yeah.
if the test is considered executed second time and
Mm.
onwards,
Mm-hmm.
then we consider as a that test cases we consider as a regression testing.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of very fine line there. So I think it's all correct. In terms of, like, there is very, minor sort of difference in all these concepts,
Yes.
but most of the interviewers won't bother around too much of the detail, right? But they might question, how is it different from retesting? Overall, all these things are related. Okay, so I'm not saying your answer is not correct, or it is incorrect. It's basically, how somebody who is working in the organization, there are different terms used for many of the things that you will find on the internet. And actually, when you go to the projects, there will be different terms used for those sort of testings, right? All right, so that's good. Let's move on to the next one. So what is usability testing?
So, the usability testing here, we check that the our software is efficiently to use to the end user. So
Mm-hmm.
here we check that our software is uh, very good as per the as per the requirement document. Our software is usable or not. So
Mm-hmm.
here we check the usability of the software.
Right. Okay. Any examples as such,
Usability testing example is like
like what will you test as part of the usability when we say usability testing? So say, for example, I give you a mobile application to test, and what will be your approach? What will you actually test when I say, can you check the usability of this application?
so mobile application. So we install the application, and after the installation complete, we launch that application,
Mhm.
and we check all the features. It is working or properly or not. So it is easily usable or not. It is so
That's
here
correct. Yeah,
the main thing that is it is easily usable or not to the end user or the customer. So here we check
absolutely.
in the usability testing.
Right. Yeah. So not the functionality basically as such. So basically, in the functional testing, you will anyways cover in the functional testing. The core idea of usability testing, as you mentioned, that how usable it is, how easy is it to use that, where should I click? Am I able to find all the links or buttons I need in that application? And when I see the application, when I launch it, so say, for example, if you launch Facebook application, it is everything is, like, even a person who doesn't know anything about Facebook, they will be able to, just by seeing the icons, they'll be able to, like, identify what this
First
icon means,
registration
right? So those sort of things, how a person who doesn't know anything about the software, if they are using a complex software or any sort of software, how easy is it for them to use it? Whether they can navigate to the links or to the location where they want to. Are icons presentable and are self-explanatory for the things? So those sort of things. And it's a vast, like usability testing is something which is for the theory part of it. It's fine, whatever we are discussing, but it's a complete different field altogether. There are user experience people who design the UI accordingly, and then there are UX team that does the research, does the implementation, and then do the testing accordingly, right? So it's a big process. So that's good. Let's move on to the next one. So do you only test the software when the software build is ready, or when does the software testing actually start? When should the software testing actually start in the development life cycle?
Okay, so as per my understanding, we test the software in any. There is no any. There is no any like.
So usually, like, we have this development life cycle, right? So where it starts from the requirement and then design. If we talk about waterfall, now agile is a bit different, but should we as a testers wait for the build to be ready and then start testing?
No, we start testing as early as possible because it is more convenient and before after building the software. So there is uh, quite difficult to finding the bugs and errors. So I think we just do the testing as early as possible.
That's correct. Yeah. So it's not difficult to find defects in the later phases, but it's very difficult to fix them. The cost becomes very high. So testing as early as possible is what testers should be doing. Like when we talk about static testing, it is because we start as early as possible, right? So static testing, when we have the software development life cycle, you have the requirements document or you have the user stories, then as a testing team or as a tester within the team, you start analyzing those. You start finding the gaps within those requirements. You start thinking, how am I going to test these user stories or these requirements, and start writing sort of test scenarios. And that will give you an idea that if there is any gap within the requirement, you'll go and provide your feedback. And that's what happens in agile development anyways, but testing as early as possible, right? So that's the correct answer for that. And that's why, like you have static testing, and then once the build is ready, it's deployed. That's when dynamic testing starts, right? Yeah. All right. So let's move to the next one. And I think we are almost over time now. So this will be the last question. So when do defects occur in the software, or why do defects basically occur? Not when, why do defects occur?
The defects occur because of the human error, that is software complexity. Then after that maybe is miscommunication, then the or misunderstanding, and after that uh, there is loss of requirements, and also the requirement changes very so, and also the coding logic also not appropriatable as per the requirement document. So these are the basic thing that because of that defect occurs in software.
Right. Yeah, absolutely correct. So um, the reason I asked this question is basically, if you know as a tester when can defects arise or why do defects arise, then you know the causes that can happen, right? So there might be gap within the requirement, right? So if you know that there might be a gap within the requirement or the user story, that's when as a tester you can go and analyze it and provide your feedback so that those gaps or those issues are identified as early as possible rather than waiting in the later phases, right? So you would have also seen the cost of defect. The cost of defect becomes higher the later the defect is found in the development phases, right? The reason being, if it is a requirement defect, it has to come back to the requirement. Requirement needs to be fixed, then design, then accordingly. So cost becomes really high. So this last question, just think about it. What other factors might be possible why the defects can occur, right? And this is actually very helpful when you will actually go into the software testing field. It will be really helpful for you to analyze these are the reasons that why a defect occurs. So let me as a tester provide a value add and get myself involved and provide the feedback accordingly and provide the help to the team, because nowadays it's agile, and agile quality is everyone's responsibility. It's not just the testing team, but that's how basically we work as a team collaboratively. So yeah, just an input there, but yeah, your answer is absolutely correct. So I think that's pretty much it. Sakshi, it was absolute pleasure talking to you. Any questions for me?
No, sir, there is no question from my side.
All right. Okay. So let's come back to the feedback. First thing, I'll provide the feedback on your resume. Okay. So a resume looks pretty, I won't say very good, but it's above, average resume. It covers it's formatted correctly. It covers all the details. Feedback on the resume is some of the font doesn't match. Okay. So try to fix that. Try to detail out your projects, like you have done college project. Then you are also doing Selenium automation. I don't see those details in the resume. Okay. Try to detail that out. Whatever things you are doing as part of your current, it doesn't matter whether you are in the organization you are working or not, right? You are putting your effort, you are learning something, which is what organizations want, your proactive approach. So if you have done any sort of project, any automation thing, mention it here. Okay, it will definitely help you. But otherwise, your resume is all good. The next thing is around the answers that you have provided. Most of your answer, okay, most of your answer are, I'm satisfied with the answers that you have provided. You have gone into very detailed, to the point answers. Few answers here and there were, not to the point or sort of little bit misleading. But if you are able to answer the way you have answered me, and the interviewer is not too fussy, they will hire you. Okay. So because what people look for is your proactive approach, and whether once you come into the organization, whether you are willing to learn, and what you have learned till now, right? So you have learned pretty good. You have read the details. You are doing some Selenium automation as well. So in terms of all those aspects, I think it's all good. Just keep reading and keep focusing on a little bit more technical aspects of the technical questions that you might be asked, right? So they might also go into the Selenium part, which we haven't covered today, but go into a little bit technical details of the Selenium interview questions, and that will cover you from both manual and automation point of view. Okay. So I'm pretty sure that you will be very soon be placed somewhere. Any questions from me?
No, sir, thank you. I am very glad that I am sharing with you the mock interview session. So it's pleasure to meet you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sakshi. And it's nice talking to you. Have a great day.
Thank you, sir.